All right, one more panel, and this is a good one. We have some great leaders of organizations working across different generations here to think about what are the new ways and some of the traditional ways that still work of working across generations in our work. What are the new ways we think about AI within that? What are the new ways we think about different techniques? My name is Hendricks. I'm the director of the 10-year forecast at the Institute for the Future. And I also work on a lot of other research projects across the Institute. So I work across our research groups. And I'm going to share with you in a moment some of our research about young people, as I mentioned. But before I do that, I don't want to hog the microphone. So I'm going to allow and invite our panelists here to introduce themselves. And these are all leaders from great organizations working with multiple generations. So the first question to you all would be, so to introduce yourself and your organization, and just what does multi-generational engagement mean to you, and why is it important? Maybe we'll start here and we'll go this way. I'm going to put you on the spot, Trent.
Good afternoon. I'm Trent Stamp. I'm the CEO of the Eisner Foundation, based in Los Angeles, California. We also work in New York City, and we are a intergenerational funder, meaning that everything that we fund treats seniors and children or teenagers as assets and as resources to serve the other population and create a community benefit from there. So what that means in practice is we fund a lot of mentoring, a lot of tutoring, a lot of teaching, and that can go both ways, especially around technology. We fund intergenerational arts, an orchestra, a playwriting group, those types of things where two groups come together to create a larger piece of art. We do a lot of shared site work, which is where you literally put something like a preschool inside a senior center or put senior housing on a college campus, anything where you bring two groups together in one unique geographical site to learn from each other and to create, again, that community benefit. We do a lot of work with grandparents who are parenting their grandchildren, usually for a lousy reason. That middle generation has been removed from the process in some way or another, so we're looking at providing education, advocacy, legal help to that group. It's a super complicated system to navigate, just even deciding whether I should adopt, how do I access benefits, those types of things. And then we do some work around something what we call future of work, which is primarily dealing with older workers and trying to get them back into the workforce, usually with the help of a younger worker, trying to get them the technology help, the cultural help that they need. Oftentimes in Southern California, it's because their industry has been downsized in some way or another, whether it's aeronautics or filmmaking, but we have a large cadre of super talented older workers who we're trying to figure out how to get them back into the workforce and put them to work for a community benefit rather than warehousing them in some way or another. So I'll stop there, but it's obviously all of our work is intentional. It's not just putting younger and older people in the room together and expecting something super cool to happen, because it doesn't. That's just a screening of your local movie theater. You really have to have that intentionality. You have to have outcome measures that you're aiming for. You have to do some cultural competency around those two groups. And then you can try to create a situation where those two groups that are oftentimes forgotten, left behind, the two loneliest groups in our society, teenagers and those over 65, to try to treat them as assets and resources to bring together a positive for our communities.
Beautiful, thank you. Lysa.
Hi, thank you. I'm Lysa Ratliff. I'm the CEO of a national nonprofit called KABOOM. Very fun to say all the time. Oh, yeah! I like that energy. We like that energy at KABOOM. We build playgrounds. So we bring kids and communities together to tell us what they want to see in their play space, in their schoolyards, in their parks, in their community, and then we bring volunteers together to actually build them. When I think about multi-generational work, our intended audience is kids. So we care about making sure that our childhood is protected, that our kids are seen and feel a sense of belonging, and that our cities are designed with them in mind. Unintentionally, I think, because of how we work with every generation. So we've built or improved about 17,000 play spaces. A lot of our play spaces are built through what we call a design day and a whole community engagement process, where we are literally inviting every generation, so primarily the alpha generation, so the youngest of our kids, to tell us what they want to see in their space. We are also inviting their caregivers, their grandparents, their teachers, their parents, their community members, their neighbors to say, what do you need in this outdoor space? What do you want to see in this schoolyard? So I think because of how we work through that community engagement process, we're able to talk across all generations. That is also reflected in our staff, which we'll get to, but it's been really beautiful to be able to take so many voices and so many perspectives and then build physical infrastructure based on what our 8-year-olds and our 80-year-olds want to see.
Beautiful, thank you. Asha.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big fan of KABOOM. It's a really great,
Me too.
Great organization. I'm Asha. I'm CEO of Giving Tuesday, and we are obviously, as I'm guessing most people know, a day of giving following Black Friday and Cyber Monday. But that's not actually what we spend 99% of our day-to-day work on. We, as a nonprofit, exist to support a global network, really a network of networks of leaders who are building cultures of giving in their own regions. So that's 105 countries at this point, and a couple thousand local communities, and then a network of what we call coalition leaders, which means groups of nonprofits that have banded together to do what we call mission over brand, which is to put their mission to the front of their storytelling campaign together and their brands, their individual brands, to the back. A really wonderful model of collaboration for the sector. And then we have a youth engagement network as well, and we call that Giving Tuesday Spark. It was actually created by a little girl, and it was first called Giving Tuesday Kids, but a lot of the young people who ended up engaging didn't want to be called kids, so we changed it to Giving Tuesday Spark at their own. They chose that name of it. And the primary thing that differentiates our youth network is, first of all, that they're global, so they really just learn a tremendous amount across boundaries. They provide an incredible amount of support for each other, and they lead, right? So we're not telling them what to care about. We don't tell them how to fundraise. We don't tell them how to build networks. Why would we? Because they know all of those things better than we do. We actually learn from them. And they know exactly what their chosen cause area is, and they know how to build communities of ambassadors around it. So my most recent reflection watching that community of Sparks is that they're essentially self-teaching themselves civics. Right? There's no civic education anymore, but what they're doing is participating in civil society and learning what it means to be a citizen of their community and their world through actually doing that work.
Wonderful, thank you. So great panel of leaders here, right? You would agree? So maybe let's start with, what are some of the most kind of common misconceptions you think, or like expectations people have about working across generations that you think aren't true, but then maybe some of the insights you've had from your work about different ways to work with across generations that are kind of the principles that you kind of go by. And maybe we'll start here again, Trent, if you don't mind, and go down the line.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway that we have from our intergenerational work that we do is that it's not just nice, but it's necessary. You know, it's not, if I told you right now to create an intergenerational view in your mind, it'd be grandma reading a book to a kid who's there, and this gauzy view of, isn't this kind of heartwarming and a throwback to an era that is long gone. That's cute, but we found that the data shows that this type of interaction is vital for the advancement of our society. Kids who have a caring adult in their lives are 4 times more likely to graduate from high school than those who don't. And I know there's a lot of smart people in the room who can start talking about causation and correlation and the other factors in play and all these types of things. But what if it were just that simple and we could just get a caring adult into the life of every child who's at risk? That caring adult doesn't have to be related to the child. It can just be anybody who gives a damn. And so we've found that this work is absolutely vital. We have a generation of kids who are at risk. I don't think anyone's going to pretend that they're not, that we solved this and it's all better now. And we have an explosion of older adults, many of whom are still very, very functional, who can provide positive outcomes for those children if they get involved in their lives. It seems to me like societal malpractice to not figure out ways to bring the two groups together. You know, unless we're all just going to pretend that we're good, and let's all just stay in our silos. So in our work, we believe that it's vital, and not just a cute, gauzy picture of grandma reading to the kid, to figure out ways to unite these generations for the benefit of both groups. Older adults get the purpose, which is vital, and everyone who's here who has any sort of medical practice or training can tell you that vitality and purpose are aligned. Leading economic and medical indicators are just lined up perfectly if you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And we have a bunch of kids who really could benefit from having older people in their lives who care about them. So for us, it's too obvious to ignore. We have to figure out ways to align the generations, especially as a society when we find that we're having really difficult problems aligning across socioeconomic status, urban versus rural, race, sexual orientation. We could do this all night long, but we do find that there is fertile ground for aligning older and younger. It's the only dichotomy in our society where one group becomes the other one if everything goes right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thinking about futures thinking, right? Any young person, futures thinking is going to become into the other generation. Just to follow up on that quickly, so you talked earlier about kind of the outcomes that you go for and that being really important. I'm curious, like, are there some strategies that emerge that make this difficult work more effective, or is it kind of case by case? It's always like sort of a different situation, do you think?
I can get us started. It's these hard questions, and because there's so many nuances here, I think I do want to speak on one of the misconceptions. Yeah. I think one of the misconceptions and potential biases we all have is that one knows better than the other. And like, this is a different version of seat at the table, right? And so if you're looking across generations, you know, I'm like, I know better. I know, but you're younger than I am. What do I know about building a playground? I have not played on the playground except, you know, going and building a playground in decades. And we've got to get over this misconception that one generation, whatever generation you're a part of, knows better than another one. When we have representation from all generations, we are able to see a 360 view and have better outcomes. I don't know, I wanted to comment on that. And then, some of the lessons learned for us is we're about 30 years old. And for most of our history, we've been building a 2,500 square foot play space. Community picks the color, kids say, I want slides or swings, and that has been celebrated for a long time. Back in maybe 2019, 2018, we looked in the mirror and said, how dare we? How dare we go into community and say, okay, it's gonna be community designed, but here's what you get to choose from. And so what we started doing that's taken us on the journey that we're still in today is we're listening first. We are not going in with our perspectives. We are going to go in and we are going to not think from our point of view or our shoes, but we are going to sit in the shoes of whoever is on the other side of the table. And we're going to listen first, and then we're going to truly try to have more responsive design. So that instead of saying, we just built in Baltimore, oh, we can do what we did in Baltimore here in LA. That is not getting the best solutions for the kids and communities, and that's been a big lesson for us. We're still on that journey, but it's been a big lesson for us to say, we're not going to walk into space or conversations with the answers. We are going to walk into space and conversations listening first, so that we can hear what we don't know. And I think no matter what, if you're building playgrounds, if you're doing anything, that is just a critical lesson that breeds better results.
Absolutely. And so just to follow up that with you, Lysa, for a second. So what, and not to put you on the spot, but what are some of the things that emerge out of those where you see like, oh, if we hadn't done this listening, we wouldn't have learned this nuance, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so proud of, with so much to do still. Like, we have so much to do still. But we are now building nature exploration areas. We're building outdoor classrooms. We're building sport courts. We are doing school gardens. When, if you look 5 years ago, I think we had done those as side projects, but our primary work, it was all, 2,500 square foot playgrounds. Now, because of that listening, in Oakland, California, we just built 15, renovated 10,000 plus schoolyards, 10,000 square foot schoolyards, where you literally have 60 trees planted. You've got a nature exploration area. You've got the outdoor classrooms. We would have never, ever done that had we not stopped and listened. We would have still gone into community saying, have we got the answer for you? You pick the colors, you pick the equipment, but we've got, in this little square, are gonna do something special. We would have never been able to transform and innovate the way we have if we had not listened.
That's fantastic. I'm glad I asked that. Those are great examples. I love those. So Asha, same question to you. You can bounce off of any of this, or default would be sort of thinking about kind of misconceptions of working across generations and some strategies that you have found.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest misconception that I see a lot is simply that young people are less generous than the generations that came before them. I mean, it's just untrue on its face. It's also incredibly unfair, but it's also incredibly damaging to us to make that assumption. And I hear it a lot. These younger generations, they are just not generous. A younger generation that is generous is not going to look like an older generation that is generous, right? Our sector is not going to look the same. It is never going to look the same again, but we have incredibly generous younger generations to engage. The problem is that we're not engaging them well because we're often not engaging them at all, right? And if we're not asking people to give, then they're not going to give. And with these generations, we could have generations full of our champions and ambassadors for our missions going forward for decades to come, right? So to celebrate the generosity that is there among young people and acknowledge that it is expressed differently and that younger people are simply not going to be enamored of a big storied institution because it is a big storied institution. Institution is just not a language that they speak innately, right? To the institutional life to them means their job, right? If they're of working age, right? Maybe it means their school system. But in general, when they're really engaging with things that really excite them, with their social networks, they're not speaking institution, right? They're more often speaking movement. So to the degree that we can take the best of institutions and the best of movement dynamics and wrap them into new engagement strategies to reach young people, the better off we'll be as a sector a generation from now. Even if it just wasn't true to label entire generations as not generous, right? We actually have a self-interest.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So maybe I'd love to dive on that a little deeper too. Like, can you give us an example of what it looks like? Because I think for a lot of people, right, we're all used to the water we're swimming in, right? And so it's hard to kind of know what the distinctions are until we see them modeled. So what would be an example of something that maybe would be previously communicated in a kind of institutional way, and what does that look like to take it in a more of a movement direction?
So our young people do things like anti-bullying initiatives in schools. We have a kid in South Africa who organizes groups of volunteers to walk female students home from school in particularly high areas with high rates of sexual violence, et cetera. We have a kid who's raising awareness about the climate through soccer games. Believe me, there's like a whole connection. Like the list just kind of goes on and on and on. Some of these young people, not saying kids, do have their own 501c3s. They have their own podcasts. Like they're really barreling ahead full forward. But I would say that if you made a generalization, you would say they're not particularly structured. They're not particularly interested in the structure of social impact life, right? Whether that's being a nonprofit, whether it's being an LLC, whether it's being a startup, whatever. They're kind of interested in like whatever structure is gonna get the most done, right? Whatever's gonna allow them to cut out the barriers, right? To lessen the friction, to get their thing done. And so I think we, first of all, just acknowledging that is a big step forward. And then I think like if you do a thought experiment where you just like get rid of the word fundraising and get rid of the word donor, then you're left thinking about the broad category of engagement. And the battle for engagement and participation is the battle that will define the health of the nonprofit sector moving forward, period. So if you understand the collective movement dynamics that inspire young people to take action, you're simply going to do a better job engaging, right? Not because you're being fake or you're, like the Steve Buscemi clip where he says, "Hello, fellow kids." Like I sometimes think that when I see some communications geared toward younger people, but really authentically meeting them where they are and coming at it with an attitude of, we're here to support you. We also would really love you to be engaged with our mission. Who knows what that young person's going to mean to you 2 decades from now?
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So, yeah.
Can I just touch on that, which is, I think, getting to some of the larger trend questions, which is, in terms of giving, and Art's walking out on me right now as we speak. That's all right. It's all right. We know you're gone, and Bennett has taken over. We are fine. But historically, the 4 groups that people have given to charitably are, in some order, their university, their house of worship, their child's school, and a medical-related organization that somebody in their family or friend has been afflicted with. The Kidney Society, when someone has had kidney failure. What those 4 things have in common is that they're personal. It's proximity, you're there. And so the future of giving as we move forward here, if less kids go to college, less people go to church, less people have children to send them to the schools that they're eventually going to give in and so on, we're going to have to change this narrative in some way or another. I don't think that those people are going to stop giving, because I think that people are generally benevolent and they'd like to be part of it. And we've seen this with the rise with the GoFundMe page. When somebody has a good story to tell, people come running. But it's not going to be because you were in the room with that particular charity anymore. You probably see it because your community sees the benefit of that playground. And so they're moved by it, and there's a community benefit to it. But it's going to change over time. And if we don't address the fact that people give to things that they've seen in person, they've felt, and they have a personal connection to, of course giving is going to decline.
I want to follow up with you for a second, Trent. So because you work so intentionally across different generations, I'm wondering how you think about it internally when you're trying to communicate with cohorts that you know are in different generations. What are the ways in which you would tailor that engagement strategy differently, maybe for an older cohort than a younger one? And what are maybe some of the similarities between those 2 cohorts, if any?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to acknowledge that we're a funder. So I'm not on a day-to-day basis out there actually running any of my own programs. But we do see programs nationwide, and we're able to identify best practices for those that do this type of work with great intentionality. I do think that the similarity is one of the things that I talked about briefly in my intro, which was these are 2 groups, the older and the younger, that we as a society have just not spoken to appropriately. We've marginalized them, and we've told the young ones to go over there and wait until it's their time, and we've told the older ones, you've had your time, feel free to move out of the way. And in both cases, it's a colossal mistake. These are assets and resources that should be treasured and in some ways put to work because they have a lot to offer, not only to each other, but to society as a whole. In terms of the groups, and we talk a lot about how we treat them both as assets and resources, and every good nonprofit will tell you that one of the things that makes them good is oftentimes their senior volunteers. Senior volunteers are more reliable, they stay longer, they are not there to pad their resume or get their community service hours, and they have kind of that been there, done that factor of, that's fine. The first time a 15-year-old mouths off to me, I'm not going to run from the room because I've seen that. Why don't you be quiet and we can move forward? That being said, not every senior is awesome. Uh, We know a few who are not. Sometimes they're racist. Sometimes they're mean. Sometimes they have that exact thought we just had before that you eloquated so beautifully, which is, I know better than you. And they're not listening. So I tell nonprofits you should start with a big pool of senior volunteers because they will be the cheapest, best asset that you can possibly do to deliver your product. But if you get a lousy one, toss them quick because you're probably not going to retrain them real fast to not be racist. It's just something that needs to go into play. Seniors as a general, good. A few, not.
Fair enough.
I can build on that and
Yeah,
then go
please.
a little bit deeper. Yeah, no, not that. I mentioned our design day. Has anyone ever built a KABOOM playground? Oh yeah, okay. So you've had a design day, and our design days are typically a session with the kids, and we ask very similar questions to what we ask the adults, but in a different way and in a different format. For most of our history, the design day with the kids, we give them crayons, we give them placemats. Why is this important to you? How do you play? What do you want to see outside? Now we're giving them like manipulative toys and tree branches and stuff so that they can build little playground models. And then we do a session afterward and we share with the adults, kind of this is what's important to the young people, but we want to talk to you as well. How do you use your outdoor space? What would make you stay longer at the playground so that our kids can play longer? Do you need benches? Do you need shade? And so we found a way to have a dialogue with both groups in a way that honors our primary customer, so to speak, which is the kid, but engages the adults in it in a way that helps them see value. And this has been important to us because recently we've been trying to see, is there a difference when KABOOM builds a play space or if it's just dropped in the ground? Is it used more? You know, ultimately, we want to make sure that we're building spaces that are actually used. And we've done 2 studies so far, one in Uvalde, Texas, one in Prince George's County, Maryland. And early indicators, fingers crossed, we're going to do 2 more, that KABOOM play spaces are used 4 times as much. And it's not because there's just, you know, an amazing playgrounds. There's amazing playgrounds everywhere. It's because we think, because of that engagement process on the front end, and now you have a community that is like, that's mine. I belong here. I designed that. I said what I needed and somebody responded. And so I'm going to be out there using my space with my community, with my family, and we've got the data that's starting to prove that, which really speaks to us about doubling down on our community engagement work. What I wanted to dig underneath that is like, we're all here in a human experience. And earlier I took a call, we've done a lot of work in Uvalde, Texas. We've built 12 play spaces there, and a partner has built 2. We did our first one after the tragedy at Robb Elementary School. And what we witnessed there in an extreme way is what we witness across all communities, is that people long to come together in common purpose and do something. And we built that one play space, and we told the community, we'll be back if resources allow, we'll be back if you want us to come back. We've now gone back 12 times. But I took a call earlier from a community member there that I'm just quite fond of. She's like a daughter to me, who just called in tears because her father got in an accident. And years ago, she lost her mother in a very similar car accident. And she's in tears and wanting comfort and a mother figure. And that's what I think is underneath the engagement side, is ultimately people want to be connected to one another in authentic ways. And that's not generational, that's not in silos, that's across the human experience. So if we can find ways, I know we're talking strategies and kind of business terms, but if we can find ways to make sure that people feel a sense of belonging and they have a shared human experience, then we can not only be channels for change, but we can be channels to bring people together in common purpose to solve problems. And I think it's important to talk about what's underneath a lot of the engagement work we do. It's this longing for people to be connected.
Yeah, and to follow up with you, so what you're saying about this shift from sort of spaces that are kind of kid-coded, like thinking like, oh, we're going to make something just for kids, and to more of these are community spaces, which is really beautiful places to bring people together. It makes me think that, and I hadn't thought about this before, that there's almost kind of a privilege that we associate with kids of like, oh, kids get to have fun spaces. Like we can't just build community spaces for ourselves. But do you find, is there almost like a point where you think KABOOM sort of becomes, like I would imagine you have like more older folks coming to these more kind of holistic community spaces as well, right? And do you feel like, is there a transition to kind of full community spaces that's like in the offing, or is there something really like vital about kind of keeping it rooted in like children's playgrounds kind of DNA?
Yeah, I mean, for us, kids are at the center, 100%. We are adults in a chaotic time, quite frankly, introducing a lot of toxicity into our kids at the most precious time of their journey, which is childhood. And so for us, however we can put a bubble around that childhood and allow it to breed all of the things that it should, all of the things I certainly had the benefit to receive in my childhood, that is the center of our purpose. But it is adults, and not all kids we focus on place-based equity. So we're going to communities that may not have the resources, that may not have play spaces in their schools, that may not have play spaces in their community. That's where we want to go because kids don't actually have access to playgrounds. So that's number one. Number two is adults are bringing kids to playgrounds. Well, for most time, we're kind of out of the era of you just go, ride your bike 2 miles away. I'll see you when you get home. It's no, you stay right here and probably play video games versus go outside. We need to make it convenient and appealing for adults. So though kids are at the center of what we do, we want to make sure that we are thinking about what does multi-generational space look like? Because if we can keep the parents longer, then the kids will be playing longer and getting all of the benefits from that. Just a quick stat, and I'll stop. Kids are on their screens for like 7.5 hours a day versus playing outside or having physical activity for 6 minutes a day. And so outdoor activity and play and being in public space really needs to be a family affair, so it becomes a lifestyle. So if we can design benches and shade, and I'd love a place where we could even have Wi-Fi, whatever it takes to keep those parents there longer for the kids to play, then we want to make sure that we're building around those kids, which means we're also building for the adults.
Right, so the parents have screen time instead of the kids. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Asha, feel free to tee off of any of that, or another place we could go would be like, what are the challenges that you still see? Like, what's the work to be done in this space that challenges Giving Tuesday?
So I'll do both things. So I think I think altruism is exactly the same as place-based in the sense that it needs to be a family affair. Right? And I think even very, very good people tend not to talk about giving with their kids. And if they do, it's like, there was a typhoon a world away, and we're going to all collect pennies in a penny jar to send to the children who are suffering from the typhoon. But if we are a lot more intentional about that, right, then we are giving young people not only the tools to participate civically, right, along with just vote. It's important to vote. Okay, right? There's an equally powerful tool that we all have, which is the tool to care for each other, to care for our communities, right? To try to make things better than we found them. And that's a very powerful tool to give kids, because one of the great things about the younger generations is that they are so open about their mental health. They're so open about loneliness. They're so open about these challenges. Our Sparks have like mental health rallies that they just organize themselves. They're just opportunities for them to be together and talk openly about these things. That's a gift that they talk about these things so openly. And so it gives us an opening to speak to them about how one of the antidotes to feeling lonely is to care for each other, right? So that it's that somebody said earlier, the gentleman from Salvation Army was saying, like it's about others. It's not always about me, right? And one of the side effects of staring at phones all the time is you can begin to think like it's just all what is about your own sensory input, your own dopamine drips, et cetera. And it's true that kids are getting way, way, way too much of that. They're also finding their community in those digital spaces. So I think they need real life community for sure, but those digital space communities are not to be discounted either. So I think just talking a lot more intentionally as a family or intergenerationally in any form of community is really beneficial.
Yeah, you've actually set up so many things that I was going to talk about in the research presentation. I'm going to take that segue. Thank you for that. Because at the Institute for the Future, we're always trying to think ahead, thinking about the future, and I think every parent is doing this as well. Every parent is a futurist, thinking about the future of their children. So one of the things we've done at the Institute over the years is we do a lot of ethnography, a lot of interviewing of different communities to try to understand how are people behaving or reacting differently to different things. So I have a little, for us it'll be up here, for the audience it's back here. Just a quick sort of, this is a piece of research that we developed recently for a project around the future of finance actually, and thinking about young people. We called this Growing Up in the Uncanny Valley, or I like the title better. The original title was Gen Alpha's Adulting. So thinking about kids sort of under 15 and what's their kind of, and there's a lot of, you can overrepresent cohort experience very easily, right, and overgeneralize, but what are some of the patterns that we see? And so one of the things we look at when we look at kind of the children sort of under 15, and I know this graph is hard to see, but you can just look at the sort of shape of it here, that even though we talk a lot about kind of like the demographic cliff and people having fewer kids, that the Gen Alphas, the kids that are 15 and younger, like my kids that were here today, who are 11 and 9, is the biggest generation yet. So this young people coming in are and maybe will be the biggest generation that we'll have before maybe there's some contraction there. So that's interesting, right? So we've got that. And within this, and I know for us it's really hard to see, but that globally already, 1 in 3 internet users is a child, so is under 18. And currently, kids 14 and under represent 26%, a quarter of the world's population. There are almost 2 billion kids under 14 around the world, right? So when we're thinking about this young generation, this is like a massive group of people, right? We tend to kind of think about that a little differently. And there's a lot of the things you spoke to that we've kind of recognized are part of the experience of this group of young people, that they have grown up with the kind of normalization of climate-related events, right? They're seeing a lot of climate sort of anxiety. They're seeing those anxieties. They had the pandemic in their early childhood. That was this huge disruptive event that we all had many years to sort of compare the world not being like that too, but then suddenly all these things shifted. And this kind of inherited financial anxiety from their parents, of a kind of like spendthrift kind of a generation. And out of that we see that these impacts altogether have kind of created more of a sense, we believe, of boundaries, that this younger generation kind of understands more about their mental health boundaries, about financial boundaries, even like the kind of unfettered access to screens. Like I think we think of Gen Z, kind of a little bit older. That was the first generation, like kind of iPad generation, and every kid got an iPad, and that worked really well, it seemed, until it didn't, right? In terms of just engaging young people, right? They were engaged by those devices, but there's all these studies coming out now about all the detrimental effects of that. But I think now, like sort of parents that are kind of coming on the other end of that, there's a lot more understanding of the sort of boundaries of screen time, and that there's just limits to things, right? And people saw more work-life boundaries being set in the pandemic. So we sort of see a cohort that's emerging that has more of a sense of boundaries. And within these studies, that mental health, as you mentioned, right, that was what kind of keyed me off on this, is such a huge concern. There's so much literacy, like for parents about their young people, but also within young people, that when parents are asked now what their concerns are for young people, things like being bullied or kind of worse kinds of problems, drugs and alcohol, violence, harassment. These are concerns people have, but struggling with anxiety or depression, 40% think they're extremely or very concerned about that. So massive kind of concern there. I mentioned this screen limits as something that these young people are encountering. And so when we ask this question of how will Gen Alphas approach adulting in this age of generative AI that we've been talking about today, one of the things we look at is, for one, there's this sort of, that these young people do a lot of things kind of more publicly. Like the sort of like loud budgeting is this one concept where people are kind of announcing what they're paying for things. There's more kind of transparency about things that used to be considered private. There's less of, I think it's kind of related to what you were saying about the that they don't care about the institution or the norms or the traditions. It's like what's going to work, and also like what's going on. Like clearly the adults don't have things figured out. They're all stressed out. So the young people are trying to sort of figure that out on their own. And that one of the biggest pieces of this, which I think is interesting as both a kind of a dynamic that's troubling, but also one that has some opportunities for thinking about engagement, is this idea of engaging with digital entertainment and video games, right? That 20% of gamers are under 18, so about 600 million people. Asia has the largest population of active gamers. And this used to be something that was traditionally kind of male-dominated, like boys played video games and girls didn't, but that's really kind of evened out over the years. There's a lot more games now that are sort of aimed at things like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley, these kind of games that are open-ended and exploration, and they have different kinds of dynamics in them. So it's only about 55% male now and getting closer to parity in younger generations. And that a lot of these gamers are buying a lot of games, and you're talking about these sort of digital tools and how not to dismiss them, right? And so that's what kind of I wanted to talk about here too, is that this idea of these young people, they're living inside of these digital worlds, which we think of as video games, but increasingly they're social spaces, right? They're spaces where people are getting together with their friends, they're finding some meaning in them. It's not to say that we want them to spend all of this time in there, but this is an experience that they're having. And so they're getting used to kind of shopping in these digital things, and in particular, in terms of information literacy, we noticed that a lot of video games have these very kind of complex sort of like dashboards of a lot of information presented all at once, and that young people playing these games are actually kind of developing this literacy of being able to sort of look at more complex information and make sense of it for themselves, whether they're looking at kind of radar charts or different graphs or different kinds of things, that there's this increased literacy of density of information. I mean, I think it has these trade-offs of, there's a lot of studies suggesting our ability to kind of go deep on topics is getting worse, but to move across information, across contexts is something that we're more used to within these dashboards. But the sort of summary is here that one of the sort of forecasts we would make in the space when thinking about engaging with young people, especially maybe around fundraising, would be that over this next decade, Gen Alphas will apply this experience they have playing video games, being in social feeds with their friends, and these kind of emergent AI tools to kind of create new practices that, so from games, they're going to use these dashboards to manage their finances and their personal health into kind of almost more like portfolio management, that we sort of see young people maybe managing things that look more like portfolios from a younger age. From social media, embracing this kind of loud adulting, making sort of intimate information like their financial transactions, like I mentioned, more transparent and sociable. The signal I showed before was also about these get ready with me videos, people showing their kind of morning routine and modeling that while also giving financial advice, sort of teaching each other things in these contexts. And then working a lot more within their feeds, within their sort of digital worlds, probably soon accompanied by AI agents to kind of make decisions and make their own sort of trade-offs, their own cost benefits, think about what matters to them, what do they care about. And a lot of what you were saying, Asha, sort of made me think about this in terms of how they're trying to make sense of things for themselves and using these new tools to do that. And one of the provocations we were talking about voting a little bit too, is, as young people get more information and as we bring them into more stakeholder conversations, we can imagine, like, what if we gave more children the right to vote, and what would that look like? But, so that's just a little piece from us, but I think I want to, without making you respond directly to that, just curious what you see emerging. Like, what do you see as different within these younger generations that are coming out now? What are the challenges or the opportunities that you see that are more about the nature of the world that these people are growing up in, and how they're adapting to that might have been, that might make for different ways of engaging with them than we would have traditionally thought of multi-generational engagement? What challenges or things? And so I'll let anybody who wants to jump in. I know I've thrown a lot at you there. Yeah. Asha, you got it.
I think there's a few different things that are interesting about the younger generations that I've been sort of seeing lately. One is that sort of younger Gen Z age group is skewing more conservative. Another one is that there's like a growing sort of pro-Luddite movement among a lot of young people. So more time off screens, more in-person community building, right? Like less Instagram and placing so much so much emotional investment in those sources, which is really interesting. Yeah. And then the third one that is on my mind sometimes is, it's interesting that you use the word literacy, because I don't know if anybody saw this. There's a study that showed that every age group is getting more illiterate. Yeah. And that's obvious to all of us, I think, right? And really, really sad. But I think about that in terms of my own life. I have like a really solid basis of several decades reading a lot of books that I feel like I could just never read again, and it would carry me through to my last day. But the idea of truly like a generation that doesn't really read books means that there's going to be such a fundamental disconnect between the way that they think and the way that we think. I'm not saying anything's better or worse. I do like books. But the kind of literacy you're talking about is simply a different kind of literacy, and it's one that we lack. Right? So I think the intergenerational work becomes even more important, right, given those kind of disconnects. But I think those trends that we see emerging now, we have no idea what they're going to mean or what they're going to lead to. They could be wonderful changes. They could be not so wonderful changes.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to go? I'm going to go left a little bit. So
Yeah, please.
Because are there nonprofit leaders in the room? Leaders, period. Okay. My biggest challenge right now is more closer to home, which is internal. So our staff is everything from college interns to 72-year-olds. And where what we are trying to get over, so when I describe our external work, very innovative, very responsive, we're trying to do things in a new way, and yet I'm sharing behind the curtains. I probably shouldn't, but I just, that's how we learn from each other. We're doing manual invoicing. And so, we've got a large percentage of our staff are young people. And they're like, what? What are we doing here? I want to do this work because I understand my why. I want to be a part of something that I can have a sense of belonging in this mission. And yet, I need some balance in my life. You're not going to overwork me, and have me do manual things when there's more efficient ways of doing things. And that is like powerful insight, awesome solutions, the path we need to be pursuing. And yet, just because of the time I've been in the workplace, that others, the folks that are in their 70s and 60s have been in the workforce, they're in positions of authority with the point of view that they know the right way. Mm-hmm. And two things are wrong with that. One is there's actually better ways of doing it. If you would embrace humility and listen to more innovative options from people who grew up in technology, who grew up with this as their first language. I mean, I'm a /file retrieve kind of girl, and I was hoping there were some nods there, like a couple, yeah. Thank you. You know what I'm talking about. And then like, my daughter's age and the young people at work are like, AI, we don't have, we can spend our time doing something else. Yeah. And so when I think, and the value of the more seasoned professionals is a career of experience in making mistakes. Leading them is very challenging. And how do you ensure that a decision or an idea from somebody, I'm in my 50s, so I'll use my example. So in their 50s is heard and considered, but not overrated from an idea from somebody who's in their 20s or just coming into the workforce, because actually their answer may be so much better than the more seasoned person. And that has been my biggest challenge right now as I've kind of gone internal and looking at how do we modernize our organization? How do we ensure that the large percentage of our staff who have different expectations from the workplace are feeling the sense of belonging, are committed to the mission, are feeling like we are doing things efficiently and not wasting their time. And that, we're getting there, but I say it out loud because I don't know if that's challenges for anyone else. It's like we've got the external work, but we also need to make sure we're looking closer to home and looking at trends like this and ensuring that home is built and innovative and efficient the way that it needs to be so we can do better work out in community.
Yeah, what you were saying about the young people and sort of the, don't waste my time kind of thing, it resonates, it sounds like it resonates a lot with Asha's comments about that they don't care so much about the institutions or the hierarchies or the sort of, and I think there was a lot of, there's a big shift that I perceive, and a lot of our research has suggested, where we all used to kind of associate a lot more with kind of institutional status, and your job is kind of who you are, a bigger piece of your identity. And it does seem like, especially kind of post-pandemic, a lot of people are working from home, that there's just sort of a disassociation with like kind of potentially how you make money, with like who you are, with your friends, with what you care about, and maybe more of that like what's impactful, what actually works, what's going to make a difference, more of that movement. Do you sort of see that? Are there other forces within that where, because I think that is a big part of the challenge right now, is that we're all used to coming from a world that was sort of structured with institutions that we all still work for, but we see that it's the institutional forms in many ways maybe that are kind of the biggest, hardest to translate with the younger people, because they also see that we see the kind of weaknesses in the older models, but we don't know necessarily different ways of doing it, but they see all these new ways of doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, dancing around your question a little
Please
bit,
do,
but
yeah.
getting back
Let's
over
dance
to her
here.
points. I do think that a lot of this points out the value of an intergenerational workforce. And one of the things that I encounter semi-regularly when we're talking to employers about why don't you have more older workers is that they'll tell you, I don't have time to train them. Technology's flying by and I can't train them. To me, that's just pure and ugly ageism, because I mean, there's two factors at play here. One, COVID showed us that older people could learn the technology quickly if it mattered, right? I mean, all of a sudden, my father was talking to my children via Zoom an hour later because he wasn't going to take a chance on not being able to talk to his grandchildren. The second one is that same child is now 22 years old. She's entered the workforce. Do you honestly think that she didn't need training when she got her first job for a major corporation? She needed all kinds of training, including like what shoes to wear to work. But you don't mind doing that as an employer because you think, oh, this is an asset that needs to be nurtured and I need to train this person. People don't stay in jobs for 40 years anymore. Training her is the same thing as training me coming back into the workforce who doesn't know how to use your crazy manual, backslash file, whatever system. It's just whether you value your workers and whether you value having a diverse, God forbid I said it, workforce. But in this particular case, I'm actually talking about ages and having different people there. So I really hope that as we progress and this AI comes and that we don't forget that whether you're working at home with a headset on or whether you're in the office or whatever you're doing, we need that diversity of age force, because otherwise we're just weaker as a community and you're weaker as an organization.
Absolutely. So we have time probably for just maybe one or two questions. We've got a very esteemed panel here. Anybody have any burning questions for these leaders that they want to ask? We've got two microphones up here. There's one opportunity. Now's your chance. You can take it or not. Okay.
We answered them all.
All right, we did, yeah. Oh, yeah, please. Yeah, come on up.
Can I ask a quick question of Lysa?
Yeah, please.
What do you do when the kids want, like, there be a fire pit in the middle of the playground or loose tigers running around? I mean, community input is important, but...
We ask our funders for more money.
Okay.
Because they need to be safe. There's safety standards. We have to build to safety standards. But yeah, we want to
Send me that
fulfill their
proposal, because
dreams.
I'm ready to fund the fire pit with the tiger running.
Oh, you guys, you heard it here first.
Please tell us your name and who you're with and your question.
Hi, I'm Megan Foley with the Salvation Army. I was wondering if you could have picked someone to represent you today on the panel from another generation. Who would you have asked to come here to speak for you?
Great question. I was thinking of having my kids come up, but then I think that they wouldn't like to be on a panel like this because they haven't been on it. But I could have experimented with that. But what do you guys think?
I didn't hear you clearly. We could have picked someone
From another
a different
generation. So obviously we haven't necessarily represented lots of generations here.
Yeah.
So she's asking. So that's a good gap to fill. So if we could bring in somebody from another generation, who is there somebody in mind that you would bring in that you think has a great perspective?
Number one, I received that feedback. Thank you very much. We'll make sure I keep that in mind. Absolutely, absolutely. We just had our staff retreat. We call it Play Academy. We do it every year, and there was a young lady. She's in marketing communications. Her name's May. She opened up the third day of our staff retreat, and I had asked the organizers of Play Academy, like, oh, have May talk. Like, she's just very, insightful and engaged. There's just so much more to her. And she got up there and she was like, I'm going to read my speech. My comments have not been vetted by leadership. And I sat there like, oh, uh-oh. Uh-oh. And she blew us all away. Like, what came out of that young lady was, for me, it was the highlight of our 3 days. So I would find May or anyone else in our organization without a second thought and have them come here. And I thank you for naming that, because I think it's important for us to always check ourselves and see, is there a better option? What does the representation look like across the panel? That's all of our responsibility to tune into that and say, hey, we might want to make sure we're thinking of things differently. So thanks for that comment.
I don't have one in particular, but I would bring any of the teenagers that work in the programs that we fund, because we have found in our studies, most people think that the intergenerational programming is top-driven, from seniors down to the teenagers. Again, my gauzy picture of grandma reading to the kid. And we found that the real appetite is among the younger people. They want to learn from older people. They want to learn about older people. The data is just overwhelming, and we want to put people in an us versus them dynamic, but we found that when they get to know each other, there is a great thirst on the part of the younger people to be part of an intergenerational relationship of some sort, and it was surprising to me that it was as profound as it is.
I'd pick my grandmom. Because she's passed, unfortunately. I miss her terribly. But I think about her because everything that was an issue when she was young is an issue now, just in a different way. And I think all the time about if I could just ask her what it was like to come over on the boat to Ellis Island from Poland, what it was like to grow up in a Catholic family in suburban Philadelphia and have no access to reproductive birth control. It was like so many millions of questions that I would have for her, and so much understanding could be achieved if we heard more from that generation.
The perspective on turbulent times, right? Like we find ourselves in. All right, well, we're just about, oh yeah, you got a question here, please. Yes, thank you. Your name and who you're with and your question would be great.
Sure, my name is Susan Shaw, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Building Up. And our organization actually seeks to build power of women and girls who've been impacted by the justice system. And that actually builds on the last question, and this is more of a brainstorming question unless you have like concrete examples. Really just thinking about how to engage young people in ways that maybe go beyond speaking at a retreat, or I've seen advisory boards, but like what are other ways to really engage young people in leadership in a way that's not exploitative? Obviously they have to go to school. I'm just wondering if you guys have thought of any other ways, or if anyone else has any thoughts.
Great question. Yeah, what are some novel ways of engaging people across generations?
We ended up engaging young people kind of by accident. So the way that Giving Tuesday works is that it's an idea that's meant to give away. We let go of the idea completely. And that means that all of our country leaders, our Spark leaders, our community leaders have total autonomy to manifest Giving Tuesday as a giving campaign or movement or day or year-round effort completely in the way that feels authentic to them. as we got clearer on the data, as the years went by, it became clear that young people activating were an overrepresented group in Giving Tuesday. Now, every age group activates on Giving Tuesday and year-round in various ways, but really high representation. And I think it is something to do with that letting go, letting other people take an idea and own it. So our experience is that people don't want to just donate or do one thing that feels transactional, even if it's a unit of volunteerism, right? An hour of volunteerism. They want to own something, right? So like give them something to do, give them something to lead.
Yeah, and to do it in a way, the hardest part I would imagine of that is there's ways to do that that can feel condescending, right? Like here it's a part you can own, but actually we don't want you to own it because who knows what you're going to do. But to have the faith and to extend that kind of faith to, okay, we're going to trust you to own this.
I think that's the mistake sometimes that we make is that we use the phrase co-creation,
right.
And what we mean, like let's say that's in a corporate context, right? It means opening up the design phase of a product to a whole bunch of different stakeholders than would normally be in that discussion. Mm-hmm. But think about the end of that, the end result of that is a product that the same people make money out of, the same people have trademarks on, right? The ownership of the thing is the same. So co-ownership is one step beyond co-creation, and it does involve breaking some of the marketing and branding and so forth rules that we have learned in our institutional life.
Right, that's great. Great answer.
I can quickly just
Please,
say one thing.
yeah.
How are we on time? Are we almost
We're
at the
great.
time?
Let's
Okay.
go, yeah.
That co-ownership piece, I think that it's also just all the in-between time and making sure not just young people, but all generations are present and have a voice. We've got young people attending our board meetings. Building trust both ways is really important for us. We don't want to just assign projects to them. We want them to be present in all of the in-between times. And so I think a lot of it is just checking yourself every step of the way to say, who's represented here? Do we have multi-generations? Have we created an environment of shared ownership where there is inclusion for all generations? I think that's important, like beyond creating projects or initiatives, is just ensuring that all of the steps in between have that kind of representation.
Wonderful, thank you.
I would just add, and they're perfect examples of it, you just have to be authentic. Kids will sniff it out in 2 seconds if they're just part of the process, but they're not part of the result. Right? I mean, you know, if they're invited to the table and they get to share their input and then their input doesn't lead to anything, they're done. They're checked out. It's over. You got one shot. But if, you know, a kid says, I want a tiger in the playground, and you figure out a way to get a tiger in the playground, you know, you've just made that kid's life. So I'm sure you're doing it too with the population that you're serving, but you just have to be authentic. If you treat them as a prop, it's over. You know, so.
Yeah, get the tiger in the playground. That's the takeaway. All right, well, can we give a round of applause for our wonderful panel here? Thank them so much.